Yeah, and what also shouldn't be forgotten is what these guys are really up to. And it ain't going to be in 50 years, folks. As you saw, it all rallies around the date 2030. But they admit what they want to do. There is no conspiracy here, and it's all on tape, folks. And I quote, we'll own nothing and we'll be happy about it. Quote, the U.S. won't be the world's leading superpower. You won't die waiting for an organ donor. They'll be made by a 3D printer, and you'll make sure that everyone gets their vaccination shots. You'll eat much less meat. Meat will be an occasional treat, not a staple, for the good of the environment and our health. 1 billion people will be displaced by climate change. What are you going to do with all these people? You're going to have open borders. Polluters will have to pay to emit carbon dioxide. There will be a global price on carbon. This will make fossil fuels history. You could be preparing to go to Mars. Scientists will have worked out how to keep you healthy in space. Western values will have been tested to the breaking point. Quote, checks and balances that underpin our democracies must not be forgotten. That doesn't sound like utopia to me. How about you? Okay. And they clearly meant on tape by 2030, with the COVID pandemic kicking it all off as the excuse to implement this, they will be controlling every aspect of our livelihoods and getting rid of all freedom everywhere around the whole world completely. Then we will have the so-called privilege of being a ward of the Great Reset Society. Are you kidding me? That's not saving the planet, it's taking over the planet. No wonder you said, trust us, it's not what you think. You liar. In fact, it gets worse than that. The World Economic Forum on their own website expands on these 8 changes coming to the whole planet with their planetary takeover called the Great Reset. It shares the following, quote, all products will have become services. Quote, I don't own anything. I don't own a car. I don't own a house. I don't own any appliances or any clothes. Shopping is a distant memory in the city of 2030 whose inhabitants have cracked clean energy and borrow what they need on demand, and every move is tracked. Next, there's a global price on carbon. China took the lead, they say, in 2017 with a market for trading the right to emit a ton of CO2, setting the world on a path towards a single carbon price and a powerful incentive to ditch fossil fuels with efficient solar panels and prices for renewables falling sharply. Next, they say, U.S. dominance is over. That's a direct quote. Nation states will have staged a comeback. Instead of a single force, a handful of countries will dominate. Quote, farewell, hospital, hello, homespital. Technology will have further disrupted disease, and the hospital as we know it will be on its way out, with fewer accidents thanks to self-driving cars, and great strides in preventative and personalized medicine. Scalpels and organ donors are out, tiny robotic tubes and bioprint organs are in. Quote, we are eating much less meat. Again, this is their own website, folks. And they say this, we will treat meat as a treat rather than a staple, with convenience food redesigned to be healthier and less harmful to the environment. And, quote, today's Syrian refugees, 2030 CEOs. Quote, highly educated Syrian refugees will have come of age by 2030, making the case for the economic integration of those who have been forced to flee conflict. The world needs to be better prepared for populations on the move, as climate change will have displaced 1 billion people. Next, they say, the values that built the West will have been tested to the breaking point. Quote, we forget the checks and balances that bolster our democracies at our peril. And then they say this, by 2030s, we will be ready to move humans towards the red planet. And quote, once we get there, we'll probably discover evidence of alien life. And big science will help us to answer big questions about life on Earth. Yeah, including why you're taking over the planet Earth. And apparently taking over one planet's not good enough for you guys, you greedy liars. But don't worry, this is all going to turn out great. I mean, after all, they don't call it the Great Reset for nothing. Yeah, right. How dumb do you think we are? But again, as you guys can see, this is no conspiracy. They're not hiding this. It's on their own website. It's in their own videos. You name it. For the whole world to see, at least for those who have eyes to see and ears to hear. In fact, as insane as all this is, listen, this is Ida Auken from Denmark. She is one of the young global leaders of the World Economic Forum, Klaus's puppets, and she says this, quote, welcome to 2030. I own nothing, have no privacy, and life has never been better. Are you sick? And here she is expounding on that insane comment in this article, and she wrote, and I quote, "Welcome to the year 2030. Welcome to my city," or should I say, our city. I don't own anything. I don't own a car. I don't own a house. I don't own any appliances or any clothes. It might seem odd to you, but it makes perfect sense for us in this city. Everything you considered a product has now become a service. We have access to transportation, accommodation, food, and all the things we need for our daily lives. One by one, all these things became free. So it ended up not making sense for us to own much. First, communication became digitized and free to everyone. Then, when clean energy became free, things started to move quickly. Transportation dropped dramatically in price, and it made no sense for us to own cars anymore because we could call a driverless vehicle or a flying car for longer journeys within minutes. And we started transporting ourselves in a much more organized and coordinated way when public transport became easier and quicker and more convenient than a car. Now I can hardly believe that we accepted congestion and traffic jams, not to mention air pollution from combustion engines. I mean, what were we thinking? She goes on and says this. Again, this is supposed to be by 2030. Sometimes I use my bike when I go see some of my friends. I enjoy the exercise and the ride. It kind of gets the soul to come along the journey. Funny how some of the things we never seem to lose excitement, like, walking, biking, cooking, drawing, and growing plants. It makes perfect sense. It reminds us how our culture emerged out of a close relationship with nature. In our city, we don't even pay rent because someone else is using our free space whenever we don't need it. My living room is used for business meetings when I'm not there. This is crazy. She says, once in a while, I will choose to cook for myself. It's easy. The necessary kitchen equipment is delivered at my door within minutes. Since transport became free, we stopped having all those things that we stuffed in our home. Why keep a pasta maker and a crepe cooker crammed in our cupboards? We just order them when we need them. This has also made the breakthrough of the circular economy easier. When products are turned into services, no one has an interest in things like with a short lifespan. Everything is designed for durability and repairability and recyclability. The materials are flowing more quickly in our economy and can be transferred into new products pretty easily. Environmental problems seem to go away since we use clean energy and clean production method. The air is clean, the water is clean, and nobody would dare to touch the protective areas of nature because they constitute such value to our well-being. In the cities, we have plenty of green spaces and plants and trees all over. And I still don't understand why in the past we filled all free spots in the city with concrete. Shopping? Watch this. I can't remember what that is. For most of us, it's turned into choosing things to use. Sometimes I find this fun, and sometimes I just want the algorithm, i.e. AI, to do it for me. It knows my taste better than I do now. When AI and robots took over so much of our work, we suddenly had time to eat well and sleep well and spend time with other people. And the concept of rush hour makes no sense anymore since the work we can do can be done at any time. And I don't really know if I'd call it work anymore. It's more like thinking time, creation time, development time. Yeah, it's called prison time. For a while, she says, everything was turned into entertainment and people did not want to bother themselves with difficult issues. It was only at the last minute that we found out how to use all these new technologies for better purposes than just killing time. My biggest concern is that all the people who don't live in our city, they've lost their way. Those who've decided that it became too much, all this technology, those who felt obsolete and useless when robots and AI took over big parts of our jobs, those who got upset with the political system and turned against it. Once in a while, I get annoyed about the fact that I have no real privacy. It's crazy. She says, nowhere I can go and not be registered. I know that. Somewhere, everything I do, think, and dream is recorded. I just hope nobody will use it against me. This is nuts. And she closes with this. Listen to this. All in all, it's a good life. Much better than the path we're on, where it became so clear that we could not continue with the same model of growth. I mean, we had all these terrible things happening, lifestyle diseases and climate change and refugee crisis, environmental degradation and completely congested cities and water pollution, air pollution, social unrest, unemployment. We had just lost way too many people before we realized we could do things differently. Yeah, sure you did, lady. Not to mention all those people you killed with the jab. But see, isn't this great? I own nothing. She admits it. I have no privacy, and I'm monitored everywhere I go. It's the Great Reset. And it's not just to make sure, folks, you go along with this Great Reset, just to make sure that this basically planetary takeover that they call a modern utopia, where they're going to dictate and micromanage every detail of our livelihoods. The media is out there promoting the same lie too.
It's part of the human condition to imagine what the future might look like. Years ago, science fiction writers like Arthur C. Clarke dreamed and future-gazed, mapping out exactly what 2020 might be like.
The big difference when he grows up, in fact, if we wanted to wait for the year 2001, is that he will have in his own house, not a computer as big as this, but at least a console through which he can talk to his friendly local computer and get all the information you need in the course of living in a complex modern society. This will be in a compact form in his own house.
Our lives have changed so dramatically in the first 20 years of this millennium. But what will our domestic life in 2030 look like? What smart devices will be at the heart of our homes? And with assistive tech supporting us in our daily tasks, will there come a time when we never need to leave the house? We hear of things like the Internet of Things informing the stocking of our fridges and freezers, but this is hiding the real story of how we'll adopt such smart technologies. We've already invited extraordinary machine learning devices into our homes. 22% of UK households have one or more smart speakers, while the number of IoT-connected devices worldwide is projected to almost triple to 30.9 billion units by 2025. Yes, most of us only use an Alexa or Google Nest to listen to music, the radio, or play silly jokes with. But behind the scenes, big tech aims to make these products central to how our homes run.
So the companies behind smart speakers, or they're called now digital assistants, are actually trying to transform them. So they're not digital assistants anymore, but more sort of household managers or household brains that actually can control a whole network of other devices inside your home. The likes of Apple and Amazon are trying to integrate their smart devices so they work with kind of automatic hoovers that will basically work on their own. They'll map out the inside of your home. Now, whoever is in charge of household chores is going to be totally liberated from having to do that, because they won't have to spend hours hoovering. They'll just be able to get an automatic vacuum to do it instead. That will mean a big change for a lot of people. NVIDIA are basically working on developing this sort of quite large, giant robot arm that will live in your kitchen. It can help you open drawers, it can put things away, so it will map out where everything lives in your kitchen, and the idea will probably be that it can tidy up after you, or it can even do the cooking and then tidy up. That would mean you probably wouldn't even have to be in your kitchen. It might just serve food out of a kind of porthole that you never have to even enter, and obviously that would transform everybody's houses.
In the future, this sensor-led technology will likely be built right into the structures of our homes. Smart modular housing developments are starting to emerge as the viable, planet-friendly option for home buyers and construction firms alike.
So I guess the real advantage with smart homes is they'll be able to monitor everything. So they'll be able to monitor how much energy you're using, how much water you're using, and that sort of ability to essentially put sensors around your kind of everyday tasks. That will mean you'll be able to see where am I wasting energy and water, and then you'll be able to take steps to combat that. I mean, that could have a big impact on Britain trying to meet its net zero targets.
But this is just the beginning. Smart technology is beginning to reshape the way in which entire cities are inhabited. Around the world, cities are deploying sensors to track footfall, litter, and air pollution.
While we're seeing smart homes kind of making leaps and bounds at the moment, I think somewhere where it's actually kind of a bit more advanced is also smart cities. Councils have really noticed the potential here. Smart homes and smart cities are going to be integrated into the future, and that's going to make big changes.
In Sunderland, bins fitted with sensors can tell the council when they're full. And in China, sensors combined with facial recognition can detect individuals who are jaywalking and display their faces on screens to shame them. And intelligent tech is beginning to shape the way we may shop IRL in the future. In early 2021, Amazon opened its first high street supermarket in West London. Based on its successful rollout in the US, This shop uses advanced sensor technology to track the contents of your actual in-store shopping basket in real time, updating your account spending as you shop and billing you once you've left the store.
I think definitely Amazon wants it to be a high street revolution, and one of the reasons that they're creating this supermarket, and they've also just opened a new hair salon in London. This is not just so Amazon can use the technology, but it's so it can sell it to other people. I'm sure in the very near distance we'll see kind of those big supermarket chains also experimenting or integrating it into their own stores.
In the 21st century, data is the most valuable resource in the world, more so even than oil. And when used alongside smart technology and machine learning, this data will be key in the reimagining of how we live both inside and outside of the home in 2030.
Wow. Sounds like a giant prison planet to me. This is the Great Reset? It ain't great. Hello. Did you see how those smart homes will monitor and control everything you do? You know, like a prisoner who lives in a prison? And did you see how all those smart homes were? They're not much bigger than a prison cell. And did you catch that phrase? Will there come a time when we never leave the house? You know, like when you live in a prison? And speaking of which, quote, you may never have to enter the kitchen for food. It can be served to you through a porthole. Direct quote. You know, just like a prison. This is insane. This is not utopia. It's a prison planet. It's this evil, sick, twisted, megalomaniac nightmare that they're forcing upon us, folks. It's real. It's happening. It's total global slavery. I mean, what's next? You're gonna dictate what job I can get and where I get to live too? Yeah. That's also part of their evil plan. As you can see here in these videos, starting with jobs in the future that they're creating for us, you know, because even prisoners got to work.
COVID-19 is one of the biggest crises of our time. It has impacted every single one of us, shaken our social systems, and disrupted every sector of our economies. The automation of work, combined with the global recession, led workers to lose their jobs at an accelerated pace compared to previous years. And this trend is expected to continue. The ongoing shift in the division of labor between humans, machines, and algorithms might displace 85 million jobs worldwide in the next 5 years, while 97 million new roles, ones that are more adapted to this new task distribution, may emerge. By 2025, companies expect to displace roughly 6% of their total workforce. 1 in 2 workers will need reskilling, and those remaining in their current roles will need to update 40% of their skill set to adapt to the changing labor market. There is a way to collectively benefit from these challenging times. Decades of research have shown that the most valuable asset of any economy or company is its human capital. Around the globe, companies are already experiencing a shortage in relevant skills for future roles and are investing in reskilling and upskilling their workforce. By 2025, organizations say they will train over 70% of their employees to ensure they can smoothly transition into the jobs of tomorrow. These include DevOps engineers, artificial intelligence specialists, digital marketing managers, talent acquisition specialists, and customer success specialists. It will take on average between 2 weeks and 5 months for workers to pick up new skills, allowing them to move into these new roles. But data shows they won't need to have the perfect skill set to start transitioning. While 2/3 of employers expect to get a return on investment in employees' reskilling programs within just 1 year, governments will also need to step in to update and fund education and training systems, and to ensure displaced workers have adequate safety nets. With purposeful leadership and collaboration, we can turn this global crisis into a unique opportunity to transition into a future of jobs that is inclusive, fair, and sustainable.
And if you believe that, I got some swampland to sell you here in the desert, okay? But let me translate that for you. The future of jobs is going to be taken over by AI, or artificial intelligence, and robots with AI, which again, we covered in massive great detail in our other documentary, again, The AI Invasion. Please check it out. But because Klaus Schwab, the World Economic Forum, and these global elites are making AI take over half the jobs on the whole planet, you and I, the human capital, which is another code word for slave labor, we either have to let them retool our skill set for the job they tell us we can have, or become one of those useless eaters, again, they keep talking about, and have to be gotten rid of because we're not giving them any return on their investment. Hello, okay? But you can see Klaus's Nazi background and upbringing is coming into play again, okay? This is sick, folks, and that's only half of it. They're also going to dictate where we live too, you know, like a slave labor Nazi camp. You don't believe me? Watch this. Pods or prison cells? Did you see how tiny those were? That's a shed. So now we get to not escape to the she shed or man cave. We get to live in them full time. This is nuts. But this really is the plan, as crazy as it sounds. And their goal is to cram everyone into these smart cities where everybody gets their little Great Reset cubicle or smart shed or tiny pod, and somehow that's going to be fantastic. In fact, decades ago, they also produced a map of the United States called the Biodiversity Treaty that dictates where the animals get to live and where the rest of us get to live in this new utopia. As you can see by the color legend here, the red areas is where the animals get to live, and the yellow areas are the buffer zones, and the blue areas are where the human capital get to live, at least those that aren't useless eaters and are gotten rid of. And we're basically confined, as you can see, to a strip along the East Coast with military all around us. Yeah, that sounds like a prison to me. Nice utopia, right? Great reset, yeah, whatever. And corralling people into confined cities in confined pods or cells for the purposes of control while simultaneously removing any access to any and all rural areas, you know, in case you want to be free, really is the plan, folks, of this so-called Great Reset. Notice again, no mention of the U.S., but it gets even worse, folks. They not only want us to live in these tiny pods, or basically prison cells, in these large confined prison cities, but they also want to turn these places into what's called smart cities, where every aspect of our livelihoods will be totally controlled by technology run by AI or artificial intelligence. In fact, here's just one of them. As you can see, quote, Saudi prince offers glimpse of dazzling 500 billion, that's $500 billion, 500 billion smart city of the future, where, quote, you will own nothing and be happy. Quote, welcome to the line. It's a so-called good town constructed on a 100-mile line, able to house 9 million people. At the website online, the Crown Prince, he touts this, the line, also known as NEOM, as the place where there will be probably, quote, no roads, vehicles, or emissions. It'll run on 100% renewable power, and 95% of the land will probably be preserved for nature. like the biodiversity treaty. But here's this so-called digital utopia in the making.
So Saudi Arabia has done what no one thought was possible and actually started building the line. This thing is insane. It's a 500-meter tall mirrored linear city that's supposed to stretch for 170 kilometers across the desert. It's absolutely incredible. Work has now begun. Drone footage has come out. Look at it. It's absolutely insane, showing this thing being constructed. Obviously got a long way to go until it's going to look like these crazy renders. But the fact they've actually started this is big news.
For too long, humanity has existed within dysfunctional and polluted cities that ignore nature. Now, a revolution in civilization is taking place. Imagine a traditional city and consolidating its footprint, designing to protect and enhance nature. The line will be home to 9 million residents and will be built with a footprint of just 34 square kilometers. And we are designing it to provide a healthier, more sustainable quality of life. The line's communities are organized in 3 dimensions. Residents have access to all their daily needs within 5-minute walk neighborhoods. And the line's infrastructure makes it possible to travel end to end in 20 minutes with no need for cars, resulting in 0 carbon emissions. By leveraging AI technology, services are autonomous, saving you time and effort. Designed by world-leading architects, the line is 500 meters tall, 200 meters wide, 170 kilometers long, and housed within an elegant mirror glass facade. Intelligent solutions create efficiency and year-round temperate microclimate with natural ventilation. Energy and water supplies are 100% renewable. The line is designed as a series of unique communities, offering a wealth of amenities, providing equitable views and immediate access to the surrounding nature. With 40% of the world accessible within 6 hours, at the heart of the globe's key trade routes, a place for commerce and communities to thrive like nothing on Earth seen before. The line, the city that delivers new wonders for the world.
That's one of the fanciest prisons I've ever seen built. And that's not all. And I quote, the line, or NEOM, is a, quote, city of the future that has been tried with limited success in communist China, as well as in cities within the nations of Canada, South Korea, Spain, and even Singapore. In other words, it's one of the many around the world what they're actually building. Because after all, you can't house everybody in just one prison, can you? And for those of you who think these so-called smart cities or prison pods won't make it here to America, you better think again. Shocker. Remember who's in office? Mr. Build Back Better, right? Klaus Schwab's buddy, Joe Biden, okay? And I quote, Biden's $1 trillion climate change bill that Senator Joe Manchin, shocker, Democrat, West Virginia, caved in on, incorporates many of the same things as what you see in Saudi Crown Prince's advanced smart city, net zero carbon emissions, a total reliance on renewable energy, technology-driven surveillance of all human activity, and a rejection of private land ownership. All resources are tightly controlled by the government and its corporate partners. Every major U.S. city and most smaller cities are moving in this direction, minus the fanfare of the Saudi project. In other words, they don't report it, but it's going on. With each federal grant that your city accepts, it inches closer to the smart city concept you see in the previous video. For example, even cities unable to totally redesign themselves in a vertical line will move towards the concept of no roads and no automobiles. And the World Economic Forum put out a policy paper on July 18th that removes all doubt as to where this influential globalist organization is trying to take the world. The WEF now openly calls for an end to private vehicle ownership. This is the way of life that awaits us on the other side of the Great Reset and Build Back Better, where we've all been told that the World Economic Forum that we will own nothing, have no privacy, but we'll learn to like it. It's the perfect world for the lazy, feeble-minded 21st century global citizen who just wants to be able to sit back and be taken care of, despising the American ideals of hard work, property ownership, individual freedoms and responsibilities. As long as they can relax and play their video games and attend ball games and concerts and otherwise entertain themselves, they're good. They're being conditioned to accept universal basic income, live in a tiny apartment, and rely on the government for their transportation, food, and health care. They don't aspire to own a car or house, let alone a few acres out in the country. You don't need to see, watch this, it says you don't need to see a crystal ball and have one to see this in the direction where it's headed, in which all the nations are being herded into a world devoid of automobiles, traditional single-family housing, and an actual plot of land where you are capable of growing a garden, having a well, or even catching rainwater. All these things will be forbidden in smart cities that the globalists are designing for us. Remember what the World Economic Forum Chief Advisor Yuval Noah Harari says about the old-fashioned Christian concept that human beings are born with a free will. Quote, he says, that's over. He said that along with your prehistoric ideas of personal privacy. So you begin to resign yourself to the inevitable, it says, but you're now trapped within a 100-mile radius of your local smart city. That means you must buy and consume whatever food is available within the walls of that city. You begin to notice over time that the stores no longer carry traditional meat products, only vegetable-based proteins and insects. You begin to notice that you can't find a doctor who will give you honest medical advice, only that which is inextricably linked with Big Pharma and its government-mandated regimen of injections. Almost every drug your doctor prescribes is now delivering via mRNA technology, instructing your genes to manufacture whatever drug your body has become dependent upon to stay alive. You begin to notice that all your banks in the smart city are accepting only deposits of the new central bank-controlled digital currency that is only usable for government-approved goods and services. And if by some miracle you're able to make it out of the city and visit a business on the other side where people are forced to live off the grid, the businesses there, they don't accept your digital dollars. Perhaps the biggest deception is that the dystopian smart city of the future is way off over the horizon, when in reality, listen, it's right here, right now, breathing down our necks. And so they conclude with this: get ready, prepare now while you still can, because these globalists are nasty people. They will do anything to get you herded into one of their smart cities. These are smart cities designed specifically for dumb sheep. And I would agree. But speaking of dumb, they also want to use the deserts here in America to build some of these so-called smart cities or prison pods for all of us to live in, as you can see here. And I quote, for his new smart city, billionaire Mark Lore eyes where? Nevada, Utah, and Arizona. So just like the Saudi prince wants to build one in the desert over there, now they want to build them in the deserts here in the United States. And I quote, during a town hall in New York City, Diapers.com founder, this guy named Mark Lore, his team has envisioned a community called Tolosa, having dozens of 15-minute cities. It's a resident-controlled endowment to help pay for government services. The beginnings of a new sustainable city in the American desert could emerge within just 8 years, according to the billionaire Mark Lore. On Monday, the developers of the proposed city that could hold up to 5 million people, they held their first town hall. And during the panel discussion, they narrowed down the probable location of Tolosa, again they call it, saying that they're looking at parcels of land in Nevada, Utah, and Arizona. They say that autonomous vehicles operating on city streets would make the streets safer for pedestrians and reduce costs, because street lights and street signs, they won't be necessary. The roads could also be narrower, providing more room for walking and biking. And the city itself will have no curbs or parking spots. Cars looking to park will pull into an automated pod and park underground. If you were to build a city that's fully autonomous, he says, it's actually very easy. We can do it with not a lot of effort or investment. Quote, Tolosa, this project, this smart city development, will have, quote, 36 districts, each of which is envisioned as a 15-minute city. It will take residents of each district no more than a 15-minute walk or shorter bike ride to reach their daily needs, including offices and living spaces. So once again, it sounds to me like you're constructing a prison. Hello, call it a smart city all you want. That's all it is, folks. It's a prison. 15 minutes? My whole life will now be surrounded for the rest of my existence in just a 15-minute radius? This is crazy. In fact, this researcher goes a step further and he calls them, and I quote, because this is what it is, concentration camps. as you can see in this article. Now watch this. Smart cities worldwide being converted into, quote, open concentration camps, says ex-Silicon Valley engineer turned whistleblower. His name is Aman Jabi. He's a native of India. He's an engineer. He worked for Silicon Valley for 25 years. He's a co-inventor of 2 cell phone camera apps. He immigrated here into the U.S. in 1988 because at that time he admired America's our culture of liberty and ingenuity. But now he lives in Big Fork, Montana, and has become, as this article says, one of the most important whistleblowers and voices of warning about the coming beast system. His message needs to be heard by all Americans, and I highly recommend you hear him out. Before you can break out of the matrix, you need to know that you live in a matrix, and that involves recognizing the tentacles of the matrix gaining a stranglehold on your life. Many of us spend way too much time focusing on the wrong things. We endlessly talk about what's going on in Washington when we've invited the beast system right into our homes, even injected into our own bodies. We place ourselves on a path of destruction out of fear, lack of information, i.e. ignorance, and lack of discernment. Even if you live in a red state like Florida, Georgia, Tennessee, or Texas, you will not be insulated or protected from the beast system because its claws are already dug into the infrastructure of all 50 states. We have people, well-intentioned people in the conservative movement who are making their living warning us about the socialists, communists, and the Islamists, okay? And here's the hard truth. We could eliminate every single socialist, communist, and Islamist from America tomorrow if we would still be in a heap of trouble because the globalists already have the laws and technological infrastructure in place to convert our republic into a technocratic slave state. Some of the most advanced elements in this infrastructure, as Jabi points out, are, listen, in the states like Florida and Georgia and other red states. This is the dark underside of tyranny that nobody wants to talk about. Not a single politician talks about it on a regular basis. The way to defeat the system is so simple and yet so difficult. One thing I can promise you is that we will never vote our way out of it because the same people who are laying the infrastructure for smart cities worldwide are in control of the voting systems internationally. Because there are so many of us, as opposed to so few of them, we must use the power of numbers. All we have to do is say no and reject the tools of our enslavement that are offered on a shiny silver platter that looks so enticing. We must recognize that these are the very same tools and products that make our busy 21st century lives so convenient, so efficient, and entertaining. And so we buy them on cue, we upgrade them on cue, we hand over our biometric data on cue, until one day we wake up and realize that we have convenienced ourselves, entertained ourselves right into a digital gulag from which there is no escape. This is how the globalists intend on breaking the backs of free Americans. They will do it through our finances, through our healthcare system, through our entertainment system. Digital ID cards disguised as health passports or smart health cards will be required to work a job, to access the internet, and the coming digital bank accounts or digital wallets. The convergence of all these systems will make sure, in the words of the UN Agenda 2030, no person gets left behind. By the time most people wake up and see that they walked into the trap, it's going to be too late. They will have all your data. They're going to know everything about you, your strengths, your weaknesses, and your vulnerabilities. As Jabi says, you can deny reality, but you can't deny the consequences. The choice is simple. Will you choose to live as a slave in a digital concentration camp or as a free human being in full possession of your bodily autonomy and your free will? Jabi gives what I believe this article says, the most comprehensive description of the beast system that I've seen anywhere. The large cities are toast. They're all converting to smart technology, and anyone living in one should make plans to leave immediately. If you don't believe me, type, quote, smart city networks, that phrase, into your favorite search engine and peruse what comes up. But it's more than just big cities. I'm not sure that many medium or even small cities will be able to resist being folded into this techno-totalitarian infrastructure. What is still within our control is our homes and ultimately our own souls, and this is what we must protect from the demonic spirits of control that have been unleashed upon the world. And what Jabi is describing is an extremely invasive technology being set up in smart cities, from license plate readers to smart lights, smart poles, smart cars, smart neighborhoods, smart homes, smart appliances, all connected to 5G and wirelessly communicating with each other. And if you pay attention, you will see hundreds of these LED light poles lining streets and highways, and in many cases, they're retrofitted with surveillance cameras and speakers for listening. And Jabby also talks about drone charging stations being set up, how drones might be weaponized against citizens. All of this weaponization infrastructure is being installed with federal money, hundreds of millions of dollars tucked into Joe Biden's infrastructure bill, as well as his Inflation Reduction Act bill, both of which were passed by Congress with the help from Republicans. And as Jabby lays out, it's all being done in the name of safety and security. But he says, here's what it is. Our streets are spying on us. Many of the LED smart lights are outfitted with what's called PUKE, P-U-K-E, ray technology, which can be weaponized and used to, listen, incapacitate humans. This is military technology. This is in the street lights, being applied in our cities for potential use against citizens, courtesy of the U.S. Department of Homeland Security. All major intersections in a smart city have digital surveillance cameras. Pay attention, though, to interstate highways, which are also now being outfitted with the same technology. These cameras will be capable of logging in license plates of every car that passes in real time. Cameras and listening devices are going up everywhere in large, medium, and even in small cities. Then our cell phones are spying on us. Your cell phone is listening to you as well. And many of the newest phones are capable of tracking your eye movements on the screen. They're listening, they're watching, they're analyzing, and they're learning, and then it repeats the process. Quote, it's an open concentration camp for surveillance. And all this technology is not for our safety or security, as advertised. It's to grab data and use it to change your behavior, meaning the data will be used to enforce the coming social credit score system on all Americans and free people everywhere. He goes on to say, even our appliances are spying on us. And again, this is already happening, it's not coming. He said, if you have one of the newer models of refrigerators that digitally tracks your fridge's inventory, all that data is being logged for future use against you. Eating too much meat and dairy, your social credit score just got lowered a notch because globalists don't like us eating meat. It's not sustainable in their vision for the world. Our cars are spying on us. By 2025, Jabby says every car will have a minimum of 16 cameras, all digitally connected and feeding information via the internet. Driving too much outside your home, adding unnecessarily to your carbon footprint, that's a waste of gasoline, and your social credit score just got ticked down another notch. Our banks are spying on us. It's already confirmed earlier this year that the major banks and credit card companies track your purchases of guns and ammunition, and all the biggest banks are experimenting with voluntary carbon tracker app that notifies you of your carbon footprint. This is just a warm-up for when they launch the new digital money, when keeping track of your carbon output no longer falls under voluntary mode. Our digital thermostats in our homes are spying on us. Quote, remember how that worked out in Colorado this summer? When people enrolled in a voluntary temperature monitoring program, they suddenly lost all control over their home thermostats. The goal is to digitally map all things, living and non-living. Even every tree and bush in nature will have a digital ID, because once you catalog them and map them, now you can track them and control them. And he says this, the infrastructure for a locked down police state, it too is already in place. There are 1 billion digital service cameras connected to the internet, and 50 million of them are in the U.S. That's more per capita than they have in China, okay, in the U.S. The difference is that in China, the people know they're being watched 24/7 and they're compliant because they know there will be penalties for violating the rules. They know they are slaves and they accept it. In the U.S., though, they're already doing this surveillance. The only difference is they haven't told us yet. We are already in the same global system of surveillance. Some call it, quote, the Internet of Eyes. But the beast also has ears. It's not human eyes and human ears that are tracking everything we do, like Nazi Germany or Soviet Union. No, it's artificial intelligence, AI, algorithms, which is now watching us, over us, like in a prison. Quote, unlike China, where the slaves know their lot in life, listen, most Americans are still oblivious to the prison walls going around them. And here's the bottom line. Quote, this is a spiritual war being waged with high-tech tools in the hands of very wealthy Luciferian elites, but there is nothing higher than the throne of Christ. And if you haven't already, I would invite you, put your faith in Him and in Him alone. In other words, He, Jesus, is the only way out of this mess. This gigantic prison planet that they're building for us right now before our very eyes, that the Bible alone warned nearly 2,000 years ago, is simply the coming Antichrist kingdom. You really need to pay attention, and you need to get saved if you're not. But this is precisely, folks, why Hollywood, the media, who again also do the bidding of Klaus Schwab and the World Economic Forum and these sick global elite megamaniacs, has been brainwashing people for years into thinking how this prison planet, these prison pods, it's a great thing. Only, of course, they don't call it prison pods. No, that's way too obvious. Of course not. They have relabeled them as, listen, tiny homes. And if you live in one of those tiny homes, why, you'll be helping to save the planet and keeping it from blowing up. Yeah, right, you liar. But here's Hollywood helping to promote that lie for Klaus Schwab and the gang. No, that's tiny prisons. But that's how they brainwash people into thinking this is a great thing. And if you think living in one of those so-called tiny homes or prison pods in these assigned smart cities or prison compounds that the global elites are building for us are going to be even close to or spacious and luxurious as you just saw in that video, 500 square feet, you just got duped again, man. Remember what they said? Trust us, it's not that simple, when it really is. The tinier, the better is what they have planned for us prisoners. I mean, human capital people, or should I say again, just cattle. In fact, folks, they're already doing it in China. You know, the model country that Klaus Schwab always seems to rave about. Watch what their tiny homes look like over there.
These are the coffin homes of Hong Kong. An estimated 200,000 people live in these critically tiny spaces. From sleeping to cooking, these coffin cubicles are flats which are divided into 15 120 square foot apartments. One man who suffers from sclerosis pays $300 a month for 18 square feet, and the bathrooms are shared by at least a dozen other residents.
Oh yeah, that's something to look forward to in this wonderful utopia they're building for us. You know, the Great Reset. I mean, you get your very own coffin home or prison cell, whatever you want to call it. And folks, if this is all starting to sound familiar, it is. As we saw in our last documentary, Klaus Schwab, the Third Reich, and the COVID-19 Holocaust, back in the day, the Great Reset used to be called Agenda 21, which included the same desire to control every aspect of our livelihoods in order to supposedly keep the planet from blowing up. And again, they just relabeled it. But part of the goals of the old Great Reset label, Agenda 21, was that we would have no privately owned property, no air conditioning, no dams, no paved roads, no way to correct rivers for flood control, no golf courses, no pasture land used for grazing, and it got rid of things like this. Got rid of ski runs, grazing livestock. You couldn't disturb the soil by plowing of soil or anything of that nature. You couldn't build fences. Had the commercial agriculture, modern farm production, chemical fertilizers, the use of fossil fuels, any industrial activity, got rid of single-family homes, paved and tarred roads, got rid of railroads, got rid of floor and wall tiles, rangelands, fish ponds, plantations. No longer could you harvest timber, the trees, no more hunting, logging activities. Again, dams, reservoirs, straightening rivers, power line construction, all that's gone. In fact, Agenda 21, now relabeled as the Great Reset, also had plans to control your birth and even your death as well. But speaking of relabeling, if the terms Agenda 21 and the Great Reset bugs you too much as you start to catch on to what they're really up to, that is taking over the whole planet and creating a giant prison, hey, don't worry. They got a couple other labels out there to describe the same agenda to pacify us and, throw us off the trail. It's also being called Agenda 2030. Okay, which again is the target date for all this, the fourth industrial revolution. Okay, I mean, but doesn't that sound much better? I mean, doesn't that help keep you confused? I mean, informed. But let's take a look at that again. Again, their own videos describing what these new relabeled terms for taking over the planet and creating a prison really means. Okay, it used to be Great Reset, Agenda 21, but now let's take a look at this new label, Agenda 2030. And folks, you tell me if it's not the same thing.
In September 2015, all 193 UN member states adopted the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. They recognize that ending poverty calls for transforming our world through strategies that build economic growth, address social needs, and ensure environmental protection. To achieve this vision, 17 Sustainable Development Goals, known as SDGs, were defined as part of the 2030 Agenda. The SDGs and their targets balance the three dimensions of sustainable development: economic, social, and environmental, working in partnerships and calling for action by all countries. The goals are integrated and indivisible. To capture the broad scope of the SDGs, 5 core principles have been included in the 2030 Agenda. The 5 Ps: people, planet, prosperity, peace, and partnership. They underline the importance of eradicating poverty and hunger in all its forms, offering prosperity for all, and ensuring the protection of the planet and its natural resources. They emphasize a world where peace and human rights are realized for everyone, and where all countries and stakeholders act in collaborative partnerships to achieve sustainable development. These core principles also define the political priorities of the Ministry for Economic Cooperation and Development, the BMZ, when collaborating with its partner countries. The Ministry calls for Germany to fulfill its global responsibility, advocates leaving no one behind, and promotes approaches balancing the three dimensions of sustainable development. An example of how this can be done is the successful Partnership for Sustainable Textiles, initiated by the BMZ in 2014. Entering the partnership, businesses, politics, and civil society commit to improving working and environmental conditions in countries where textiles and clothing are produced. That means that human rights and social and environmental standards must be met along the entire textile supply chain. Through its support, the BMZ ensures that our clothing is produced under conditions which are fair for people and nature. Today, the partnership already accounts for 50% of revenues achieved by the German textile industry, and the aim is to reach 75% by the end of 2018. Everyone can make a difference and contribute to transforming our world in line with the 2030 Agenda. For example, through conscious purchase decisions. We can choose organically grown and fairly traded products and should only buy the amount we actually need. In such an easy way, we can contribute to sustainable development every day. In many areas, our personal decisions have impacts on nature and people around the world. We therefore need to start taking our responsibilities seriously and adjusting our actions accordingly. Join now and work together with the BMZ. Take responsibility, locally and globally, for humans and nature.
In 2015, Switzerland and the UN member states adopted the 2030 Agenda, which sets out the path to a sustainable development for all people, with 17 universal goals. But 2030 is tomorrow. To be able to act quickly, Switzerland has set priorities, especially in those areas where the potential for development is greatest. These form the 3 pillars of the Sustainable Development Strategy, SDS 2030. Sustainable consumption and production, climate, energy and biodiversity, equal opportunities and social cohesion. The focus is on different fields of action. For example, securing prosperity and well-being by conserving natural resources, reducing greenhouse gas emissions and addressing the impacts of climate change, ensuring effective equality between women and men. This strategy affects both our domestic and foreign policies and relies on multiple fundamental actors: civil society, the economy, the financial market, education, research, and innovation. These actors, as well as the cantons and municipalities, play an important role alongside the federal government. They can be drivers of sustainable development and thus make a decisive contribution to the implementation of the 2030 Agenda. With this strategy, the Federal Council is securing the future of the Swiss people and positioning the country as a role model for sustainable development.
In 2015 was an extraordinary year for the United Nations. We got the approval of the Addis Ababa Action Agenda, Financing for Development, the endorsement by all the member states of the United Nations of the Agenda 2030 and the Sustainable Development Goals, and finally in December we got the agreement on climate change.
Well, I mean, it was also an important year for the statistical community. It was the first time in the long history of the UN that the chair of the Statistical Commission actually talked to the General Assembly directly on the topic of indicators. And of course, indicators is like the last missing piece to complete the architecture of the 2030 Sustainable Development Agenda.
Sure looks like the same thing to me as the so-called Great Reset and the Agenda 21. And notice how the UN or United Nations approved and financed this newly labeled term for taking over the world, Agenda 2030, back in 2015 with partnership with all its nations. Did you get to vote on that? I didn't. Were you told about this in the news? I didn't hear about it. And then all they needed was the right crisis to come along 5 years later, called the COVID plandemic, to kick the whole thing off and start to take over the planet. In fact, even though we weren't told about this, let alone voted for this as a free people, human capital, you can at least show your support of this planetary takeover called the Great Reset, Agenda 21, and now Agenda 2030 by, that's right, sporting your very own Agenda 2030 taking over the planet line of jewelry. I wish I was making this up, but I'm not. As you can see here, you can order your very own Sustainable Development Goals badge from Amazon. You know, Jeff Bezos' company, who again works for Klaus Schwab and the World Economic Forum and the global elites, including the United Nations. It's got a nice little pin so you can attach it to your clothes. It looks nifty and trendy in case you want to be cool and hip with these people trying to take over the world and create a giant prison planet for the rest of us, okay? And apparently it even instills joy, at least for those who get to live in the mansions, those who sold their soul to Klaus Schwab and the gang, and while the rest of us get to eke out a slave existence in our new coffin homes. I mean, why don't you guys just go ahead and bring back the swastika, the SS symbol to wear? Because folks, that's all this is. It's taking over the planet. This is what Hitler wanted to do. It's sick, okay? And lest there be any doubt what's really going on here, folks, let me translate the Agenda 2030 for what it really is. Can you say total global control and takeover of the planet like the Great Reset and Agenda 21? Remember, trust us. It's really not that simple. Yeah, it really is. Watch this. Once again, change the name, relabel it, and people fall for it. But hey, just in case the labels Great Reset, Agenda 21, and Agenda 2030 don't keep you confused and avert your attention off the real big picture, the goal of taking on the planet, hey, don't forget, they've thrown in another one out there. Again, it's called the Fourth Industrial Revolution. And this one is used a lot by Klaus Schwab himself, and he definitely speaks of it glowingly. Okay, but let's take a look at the self-defined goals of this new so-called revolution of the fourth kind that Klaus and the gang are bringing to the planet whether we want it or not.
We are wondering what is happening to the world. Everything is changing.
The very idea of human being some sort of natural concept is really going to change.
Our bodies will be so high-tech, we won't be able to really distinguish between what's natural and what's artificial.
Inside our own heads is the most complex arrangement of matter in the known universe.
You might ask yourself, can we get to be superhumans?
The original Industrial Revolution was driven by the discovery that you could use steam engines to do all kinds of interesting things.
But that was followed by additional revolutions for electricity and computers and communications technology. We're now in the early stages of the fourth Industrial Revolution, which is bringing together digital, physical, and biological systems.
One of the features of this fourth Industrial Revolution is that it doesn't change what we are doing, but it changes us.
With the ability to visualize brain activity, for example, through a simple consumer-based EEG device, it gives us access to ourselves in ways that we've never before thought possible. It unlocks the black box that is the brain and enables us to really, truly be able to realize an identity that is aspirational.
There's now a scientific foundation for the effects of mindfulness on the brain, on the genome, on biological aging. And when the human mind does know itself, then you get the potential for a new renaissance that restructures itself in terms of our relationship to life, our relationship to the planet, our relationship to work.
We need a different economic model. The reason we live in cities is not different today than it was 10,000 years ago. Even if we have got networks connecting us, we still want to have places where we meet in person. Well, this means the place where we work and the place where we live are much closer to each other, a city where we don't need to have big supply chains in order to produce things, where many things can be sourced locally thanks to 3D printing and robotics. So if we're able to do something to transform cities, to make them more efficient, then the impact can be huge.
Together we are fighting to preserve our fragile climate from irreversible damage and devastation of unthinkable proportions.
If we think about the original Industrial Revolution, it was an energy revolution. I like to think of it as a kind of bookending of a period in human history during which we used fossil fuels, and it worked very well for us for a long time. But now we have to bring that to an end. We have energy technologies that can power our civilization: solar, wind, biomass. So then the question is, well, how do we get grid integration? Maybe the wind is blowing in Denmark, the sun is shining in Germany, and now you can move that electricity through an integrated grid. You can supply energy to everyone who needs it, and you can supply energy at all times.
The projection of 5 million jobs lost by 2020 to technology is serious, but it's not the main question. Construction, manufacturing, services, public health and education, these industries will still exist. The main question is, what will be the future of work? How will we define work? How will we share the wealth?
From the viewpoint of the labor or jobs, now we really need new education or new training.
Humans have always been using tools, but because of the recent advances in technology, we're beginning to have machines that can augment us in all sorts of interesting ways.
I was the first person in the world to be able to voluntarily move my legs while stepping in a robot by exciting the nervous system using electrical stimulators directly onto the spine. We believe that a cure will be possible if enough of the right people have the will to fast-track a cure for paralysis.
We take two things from the patient. First, we take a three-dimensional X-ray, and we extract the three-dimensional data out of that so we can make a perfectly shaped puzzle piece. And then we also take a sample of fat tissue from the patient so that we can extract the stem cells out of those. And we use those stem cells with this three-dimensional scaffold that we fabricate, and after 3 weeks, we have a piece of living bone that's ready for implantation.
Being able to use genome editing to understand the genetic changes that lead to cancer, and technologies like drug delivery, getting molecules into particular types of cells. There's a lot of excitement about being able to move much more quickly on this disease.
We need to take responsibility at every level of society, from the individual and the personal to the institutional to the global, to adapt to these technological challenges and changes which are redefining what it means to be human, what it means to work, what it means to be completely embedded in this world.